this is Jim Neeb from Jim Neeb Woodworks. So this is the part 2 of our 2-part basic sign making video. If you didn't see the first part for the import and design of this, I have a link down below in the comment section or in the description section where you can get the link to that video. That's specifically on how to import this and set up the tool paths. This video is the follow-up where we're going to actually go through the V-carving with the, how to use the Oramask, how to do the sealing and painting so that it turns out right, and how to do some minor repairs if you get little chip outs on the wood that you're carving into, so you can kind of recover and not have to throw it away for a little mistake. So hopefully you enjoy this. If you do, please hit subscribe and like, and send me any comments down below if you have any questions. Thanks. So this is the piece that we're going to cut the sign out of. This is just a piece of scrap oak plywood I had. Normally I don't use oak because I don't really like the color for signs. I usually like a lighter colored wood like this maple plywood here. But this was the prototype piece that I used, and I didn't really think about it when I took it out, but it's cabinet grade. It's got a thin layer of MDF on the top and the bottom on each side of the plywood plies, and then it's got the veneer on top. And the problem with it is that once the little pieces get smaller, that MDF layer tends to break off, and so when I did the prototype, I ended up with a lot of little pieces here that snapped off down below and don't have the Oramask left on them, so they're not going to paint properly because you want that mask on there so you get a nice light color where, you know, it's got to mask off the paint. So that was something I learned on this. I never tried to use that kind of plywood before, and clearly that's not a good idea. So things that do work good is particle board actually works pretty well for making signs, and MDF works great as well. And then a standard plywood like this does not have an MDF layer in it, or Baltic birch is great too. It's a nice light color, and the layers tend to stay glued on very well. So I'm just going to use oak. Like I said, I don't like the color so much, but it's what I had in my scrap pile. The other thing is, if you're going to use two colors, what I've done here is I've painted, or I've sanded and put finish on. I just use a clear lacquer on this oak. So I'm going to have the natural color on top, and then where the Oramask is sticking on here, and then where I cut down, I'm going to spray paint, so it'll be the oak color versus black contrast. But you can also just take MDF or particle board or plywood or whatever and paint it a solid spray paint color, and then put the Oramask on and machine through. So for example, if I wanted this to be, you know, blue where it was masked, I would have spray painted a nice blue layer on here first. What you do want to do though always is sand it very well before you paint it, or put clear on, and then sand it in between layers. You want a nice smooth surface for this Oramask to stick to, because the Oramask needs to stick down really nice for two reasons: for it to cut out crisply with the bits, as well as you don't want paint getting underneath that. So you need that Oramask to stick well, and it won't stick to just plain wood very well at all. So a good smooth finish of either paint, lacquer, polyurethane, whatever, but you know, make sure you have 2 or 3 coats on here and it's sanded in between so it's nice and smooth, and then it'll work really nicely. Okay, putting this stuff on is kind of a two-person job, so I have my lovely assistant here to help me. So we're going to peel this all off and then try and keep it tight. I've got a mark that's equidistant from the edge here, and the important thing is that I want this parallel to the edge so that it lines up with the CNC axis, because the part I'm cutting out is just a little bit smaller than the Oramask, so I need it to be parallel, otherwise I'll be coming out of the Oramask in the cut. So we're going to peel it all off. Pull that. just going to pull it tight and try to hit the 2 marks. Okay, tip it down on your side. I want to pull it straight. It's pretty good there. Okay, then you want to work your way across without letting it wrinkle. So I'm going to work my way down this way first, and then work towards this opposite corner, and that's it. And then we want to rub this out as good as we can. Some of these bubbles are okay. You can rub these out pretty good using your hand. After we cut it, you can see these bubbles, they work out pretty, especially on wood, because wood's porous and not airtight. But this needs to be rubbed out really well so it sticks everywhere, because it'll cut on the CNC cleaner when it's stuck to the surface really well. So I'm rubbing this out really well. You can actually see the oak wood grain coming through, which is a good indication that it's rubbed down tightly to the surface. This Oramask is only about 3/1000 of an inch thick, so it conforms to the surface pretty well. The other thing that means is that I can put the electronic touch plate on top and set the Z height and not really have to compensate extra for the thickness of the Oramask. Now you can, if you want, you can always set your Z height with the touch plate and then subtract off 3/1000 and reset your Z0, but I generally don't, because I'm cutting much deeper than that, so it really doesn't matter. So this is all rubbed down nice and tight to the surface. There's minimal air bubbles left. Most of these are just little pieces of dust under there. So it's ready to go. We can put it on the machine and cut it out now. All right, I've done a couple things here to get this prepared. I normally use a sacrificial fence or top like this. I have a stop rail on the X and Y corners coming off of my 0, 0 corner here to stop this with. In this case, I want to cut pretty close to the edge, so I've pulled my X0 over far enough that it won't hit these 2 clamps that are holding down the piece in the corner. But I haven't clamped it over here. The reason is that I actually used double-sided tape to hold this down, so it doesn't really need the clamps. So the reason the clamps are here is when I usually check this before I cut it. For V-carving, it's kind of important that it's pretty flat, and I noticed that this corner was raised. The way I test that is I bring the bit down real close to the surface, and then I just run it along the X and Y directions to see that the gap is about the same. And at that, I noticed this corner was high and it basically wasn't quite sitting down. I don't know if there's some debris under there or the board is warped and the tape can't hold it down flat. But I just simply clamped it on this end. I have a big enough extra width on the piece that it doesn't really matter. The other thing is, you notice I've got this sort of cantilevered out here, not clamped down. I don't normally do that, but I don't have a bigger base, and this is just a demonstration, so I didn't really care if it's sticking out there. The double-sided tape always holds very well, so I'm not at all worried about it coming off. It does a very good job. The other thing I did for checking alignment was to make sure this tape is running pretty parallel to my x-axis, or in the y direction, I guess, but parallel to the x travel. So I want to make sure that I don't come off of the tape and at some point cutting around this. The left and right sides are fine because they're, like I said, they're extra long, but I don't have a lot of margin in the y direction. So I ran my bit along here with just jogging to check that gap, and it was a little bit higher in this direction down on this end, so I used this corner to set my my Y0 position, just to make sure I'm always going to cut into the tape. And then the last thing I did was I gave this Oramask a very good rub down, because I want it to stick well when So I just want to make sure that the last bit of air bubbles and everything are removed. So now we're ready to cut out the profile, which is uh, just to cut out the outside perimeter. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch compression bit so that it pulls up on the bottom and pushes down against the Oramask on the top, and we'll have no chip out on the back for the plywood because of that, and we'll also have a very clean cut with the Oramask. All right, after getting a short way through the profile cut, I decided I didn't want to actually cut the profile up first. I want to do it last. The reason is if I do it first, these clamps aren't going to be able to hold this piece down. So I stopped it before it cut through, and I'm going to save that for last. The other thing I want to point out is you can see here how poorly the upcut works on this. So this is a compression bit, and the first pass isn't all that deep, so it's not deep enough yet where it's into the downcut portion. So you can see what an upcut bit does, or Oramask, it looks horrible. Now this is going to be okay because I've actually saved about 30 or 40 thousandths of tolerance for the very last pass. So when it cuts the last one out, it's going to step in and cut this nice and clean. But you can, I mean, it kind of tells you you can't really use an upcut bit with these at all. So since it does chip it, you want at least 30, maybe even 50 or 60 thousandths just to make sure that when it does come in, it gets rid of all of this stuff, which will do. It'll be fine. But I just wanted to point that out, kind of as proof that the upcuts just look horrible with this. All right, I've installed my 60-degree VBit, and I've set Z0 on the VBit in the center of the workpiece, which is what you want to do. It kind of gives you the best average. If it was perfectly flat, it wouldn't matter where you did it, but it generally isn't. So overall, I like to do it in the middle, even if I've checked the flatness in the beginning. Now, the other thing is that because I did start the profile cut, but I didn't finish it, I got my X and Y zero set down in this corner, and I want to make sure that I don't accidentally reset that every time, because I want all of these separate tool paths have to keep the same XY. So we're going to leave that alone. I just ran the Z height setting routine here for the VBit, and so now we're ready to just load the V-carving section for the 60-degree bit, and which is basically the snake and the lettering, and we're going to fire that up now. Okay, you can see here we're V-carving first with the 60-degree bit. You can watch it as it's basically the V-carving is when the router is plunging up and down to make the V-bit touch both of the lines that it's going in between. So if the lines are far apart, it plunges down farther, and if they're very close together, it's a shallower cut. So that's essentially what V-carving is, and you can see this Amana carbide blade bit cuts that Oramask very cleanly as well. All right, now we're using the 1/2 inch downcut end mill to clear out as much of the background area as we can. You can see, especially as it's cutting around the stars, because it's so large, there's a lot of places it can't get in. So this bit clears out the bulk of the stripes and everything, and then we'll come back with the 45-degree V-bit next. with the 45-degree VBit cleaning up after the 1/2 inch end mill here, you can see that it doesn't bother cutting anywhere where it knows the 1/2 inch end mill is already cut. It's basically going to, at a minimum, it's going to go all the way around the perimeter to kiss up against the same edge. But then in the corners, it's the purpose of me running this is really clean up the corners, square them off, and get into those areas where the 1/2 inch bit couldn't reach. Because the VBit is a fine tipped point, you're going to see it go back and forth a lot in those areas where there's more to remove. The step over is pretty small there. You can adjust that in your tool setting to make it cut closer if you want, and a little less ridges down in the bottom. But keep in mind that when you do that, you're gonna, like, if you make the step over half as big, you're gonna make the machining time twice as long for these kind of areas. So it's kind of a trade-off, but this bit does a nice job of cleaning up and making the corners nice and square. And here we're finishing up with a 1/4 inch compression end mill just to cut the perimeter out. Again, this cut looks ragged at the first layer because it's upcutting, but once it's plunged in a little farther, and especially when it makes the last patch and it steps in another 30 thousandths, because I've left 30 thousandths of a tolerance for the last pass, it'll clean that Oramask edge up real nicely. All right, I just finished cutting the second one out here, and I wanted to compare the prototype I did with the new one and show a couple of areas of problems that I still had. So first, I want to show just kind of an example. This is the Oramask here, and this is where I put some masking tape over it because I didn't quite have the have a wide enough Oramask to cover it all. And you can kind of see in the Vcarve portion here how fuzzy the tape is versus right up here where the Oramask was, how clean the Oramask cut, and the blue painter's tape has got a lot of fuzzies on it, and they don't rub off very good. Normally, if there's little fine splinters with Oramask, they'll just rub off. So yeah, painter's tape really doesn't work very good. Second, you can see again all these spots that basically broke off the top layer in the MDF. I still have some of that in the plywood. This is kind of, after I cut into this plywood, I can see it's not very good quality plywood. So there's some spots here, some of these scales on the snake. This whole star broke off, and it's actually just, the wood itself just completely sheared off. So this isn't a very good quality piece of plywood on the inner layers once I got into it. So that's something that's gonna impact if you're gonna do something that's very fine detailed like this. You can see some more pieces, focus here, some pieces of the snake that broke off. I'm gonna just Dremel the tops of those off after I paint it to kind of recover that, and it's probably going to look okay, but it's a little bit annoying. The bottom line is this particular model was over 40 inches wide, and I reduced it down to under 20. It's really too fine a detail to V-carve properly without breaking some of these off, I think. And then these stars are pretty small, and these tips, I think you can focus here, you can see there's some fuzzies left on them. If you just take your fingernail, they usually scrape off pretty good. So I've got some work to do on this, and that's pretty typical. You know, after you do this, you're going to have some little like little fuzzy pieces on the Oramask on the corners and stuff, and you'll have to go around. You can use a X-Acto knife, sometimes a little bit of sandpaper. Some along these long rails here, if you just take your fingernail and slide it along there, it usually comes off pretty good. But there's almost always a little bit of cleanup to do on this before we paint. So I'm going to do that. There's also some places here where you can see I use the Vcarve bit as a mill basically to get nice clean edges on here. This area was too small to get the 1/2 inch bit in, and because I didn't have downcut end mills any smaller or an 1/8 inch one like I really wanted to clear this out, I ended up using the Vcarve bit, and you can see all these little ridges that it left down here. I'm just gonna kind of flatten these out a little bit with the screwdriver. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it because when I paint this black, you're not really gonna be able to notice the difference between this and where the end mill went here anyway. So we'll come back to this after I get all the fuzzies taken off. All right, now we're gonna seal it. This is the step that a lot of people skip because they don't know, and they end up with bleed through. So what happens is the paint will soak in the end grain underneath the Oramask, and when you peel it off, you'll have like black streaks or whatever color paint it is, and there's no way to really get that out because it's just soaked into the wood. So this step is purely to prevent that. So I'm just using some leftover clear satin spray. You can use lacquer, whatever. Just make you want it to be clear, so it's not gonna show up underneath when you peel off the Oramask. So I'm gonna spray in all 4 directions because I want it to get I don't really care about sealing the bottom so much. What we're trying to do is seal these edges so that it can't get into the end grain and go out that way. So we're going to spray it from each direction, and then I'm going to let it dry, and I'm going to spray it again because a lot of times one coat isn't enough to seal those pores up. So I'll usually put 2 pretty good coats on. This one's getting empty, so I think I can get it done here. I'm going to paint the edges because I'm going to seal the edges because I'm actually going to paint this all the way around. This can is dying on me, but it should be enough. Like I said, I'm going to put another coat on anyway once this is dried. Alright, we'll let that dry for a couple hours and put another coat on, and then we'll be ready to paint it black. Okay, now I've got 2 coats on this of clear. Again, sprayed it from all 4 directions so all the sides of the edges have a good seal on them. And so now I'm just using a black spray paint that doesn't really matter, you know. I like satin, but you can use high gloss or flat, whatever fits your taste. And so we're just gonna spray the edges first. Just like this can of paint is a little bit old and not spraying very well, but it'll work. Definitely not coming out of here very fast, so it's probably been sitting in my drawer a little bit too long. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a new one. This one's just not working. Well, I forgot to hit record on the video for the second can of paint I got out, so I got one that sprayed a little better. And again, I painted from all 4 directions so that all of these cracks could get paint in every single angle, because I want all of those side walls to get painted a nice uniform cover. So This generally doesn't take 2 coats of paint because the sealer, 2 coats of sealer pretty much keeps the paint from soaking in and needing another coat. So, and besides, by the time you paint in all 4 directions, you got pretty good layer of paint done anyway. So we're gonna leave this dry, and we'll come back and pick the Oramask off and see how it looks. All right, now we're gonna do the tedious part and take off the Oramask. A couple of tools that work good. I like to use sometimes my fingernail, if I have enough fingernail, if I haven't chewed it all off, you can get under there. And then the other 2 things that work good is a knife. You can get up in under the edge. And with all the paint and stuff, it's hard to get it started sometimes. I just have to get in there. And a dental pick works good to get it started sometimes too. So there. Now this particular design is a kind of a nasty one. Normally what I do is I have the Oramask on and I'm just cutting out some lettering and stuff, and it ends up to be more of a whole sheet of Oramask left that once you get the corner up you can peel the whole thing off. If you notice this one, I mean, all of these snake scales, every single one of these has to be peeled off. So this particular design is a little bit nasty. Because I shrunk it down so much and it has too much fine detail to machine well. There's a couple places that we're gonna have to fix here. And B, because there's just so many little pieces to have to peel up. So this one's gonna take me a long time. So we're gonna put this on time lapse to save some time. Alright, I got all of the Oramask peeled off. It took quite a while since there were so many pieces, especially in the snakes. Now the last thing to do is clean up some of these spots where the top layer of the plywood broke off, so there was no Oramask there or anything. I'm just going to take a Dremel and on some of these and just kind of grind off just the top, basically the paint, so that it's light color there again. And I don't think it'll really stand out as being lower or anything like that, but it will look a lot better just to have the wood color in contrast to the black around it. All right, this is the finished product now. There's a few things that we learned with this. I would say I don't really like using plywood for the most part for this kind of thing. I think MDF or solid wood works better because you can kind of see it here. The background isn't very even. You never know whether you're cutting into grain going up and down or sideways, and you can actually end up cutting right in between layers where there's some of the glue, and so the paint doesn't always paint very evenly. In this case I used semi-gloss paint, which is probably also not wise. I think a satin works a little bit better because it gives a little more uniform sheen to it. If you stand this up and look at it on end, normally you wouldn't see that as much, but still I think that works a little bit better, is to have a semi-gloss, maybe even a flat or satin. I did grind down some of these areas that were chipped off where the plywood sheared off. That's another problem with the plywood, and the fact that this is
a little too detailed, shrunk down this far. So again, this one was originally about 40 inches wide, and it would probably work better at that size. Like this, this whole star here is one of them that the whole top layer of plywood chipped off. So I ground this down with the Dremel. So it's, if I put a clear coat on here, it would be about the same color as the other stars, but it's definitely not perfect. Again, I've gotten better results with MDF or solid wood, but you can see at least there's no bleed through on the letters, which is kind of the main thing I wanted to show, is that, you know, finish the top surface, put the Oramask on, then mill it or machine it, Vcarve it, and make sure you put a couple of good coats of sealer in these before you paint it black, and you'll get good results, you know, with no bleed through. Otherwise you'll basically see the black will kind of seep into the grain on these sides here, and it looks bad. So this is how it'll turn out if you do the right process. But again, kind of in summary, don't use upcut bits. Use Oramask, not masking tape. Probably a better, you know, use solid wood or MDF. Even particle board works pretty good in my experience. It cuts pretty clean. And keep your pieces here on top to an appropriate size. In other words, take a look at how small these pieces are going to be versus the size that you've scaled it in. If they're really small, tiny points sticking up, there's a good chance there's going to be some breakage on that, unless you have a really good quality wood. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you had any questions, either on the part 1 where we went over how to import and set up the tool paths, or on this second half where we did the machining and painting and stuff, the actual manufacturing process, feel free to leave questions or comments down in the comment sections. I always answer any questions that are there. Thank you.